Hello.
We're live.
Hi,
everyone.
I'm Elly Griffiths.
And I'm Lesley Thomson.
And we're here to chat about books and about life and about what's coming up next for both of us. So,
Yes.
Lesley's most recent book is Distant Dead, which, if you haven't read it, is absolutely amazing. Partly set in the Second World War, partly in modern times. Features an amazing thing that I hope we're going to talk about a bit later on, called the Death Cafe, where people go and talk about death, really. And actually, some of the bits in that cafe are some of the funniest I've ever read. So here it is, hardback now, paperback in October. Is that right, Lesley?
It is the 21st, Thursday. I imagine my yearly planner doesn't give me days, but being a yearly planner. But
do you know why books are always published on a Thursday? I don't.
I don't, unless you rush out, buy the book, and then the weekend's there and you start reading. That's all I can think of. But I'm sure we might get an answer, perhaps, from somebody somewhere.
I think it might be to do with when the books pages used to come out in newspapers, but obviously nothing happens like that anymore, because you've got book bloggers and reviewers who are going to, you hope, read and review immediately. But I don't know, it's still always a Thursday, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a Thursday's quite a good idea if you're having a launch, I guess, because it's nearly Friday. See, I'm thinking of the punters, and you're thinking of the marketing, which, and between us, we cover all the bases, I guess. Well, and I'd like to say that, last Thursday, not this week, was it? It wasn't today.
No.
Carry on. No, a week ago, the paperback, and I don't have it, I have the hardback of the Nighthawks came out. Paperback over there, which I have read twice and absolutely love, and may well read a third time. Well, I will read the third time at some point, definitely. It's just a gripping read, and readers obviously think so because it got to number 2, or it is at number 2 in the Sunday Times bestsellers charts this week. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, my God, I was excited. So you must have been.
Yeah, number 1 is still Richard Osman. And hey, that's a really good book. And I don't feel any resentment. The only thing I feel resentment about with Richard Osman is at Harrogate Crime Festival this year. Sadly, you weren't there this year, Lesley. I came second to him in the quiz. I mean, I don't mind being second to him in the book charts, but I don't want to be second to him in the quiz. So
yeah, or anyone. But mind you, second, having been on that team with you, and probably because I wasn't here this year, we have come lower than second. So actually, that's pretty good.
It was our best ever finish. It really was. And what helped, I have to say, was this year they had an Agatha Christie round, and I was chairing the Agatha Christie panel. So I actually knew all the answers. And you know that bit where, because quite often I do find I'm a bit of a spare part on the quiz, saying, oh, yes, I thought that, just after Mark Edwards or you or Jonathan Friedland or William says the answer. But this time I did know. I did come out, fighting in that last round.
Well, I mean, to my mind, and you gave me some Agatha Christie's for my birthday last year, you are a bit of a walking Agatha Christie expert. So I'll take this opportunity, because it's topical, to say I heard you name checked on the Today programme yesterday. I was terribly excited. I've never known somebody mentioned on the Today programme before, when they were doing the papers. So it was obviously in The Guardian yesterday that there's going to be 12 writers writing Joan Marple. This is what they were. Jane, yes, Jane Marple.
Yeah.
Michelle Hussein was saying she never realised what her name was before, and consequently I've now forgotten it. I'm thinking of Joan Hickson, aren't I, who played her?
Yes, definitely.
Anyway, 12 fantastic new writers, well, not new writers, but as in alive writers, are going to be writing these short stories. You're one of them, and they mentioned your name. I'm very excited, as I said.
I was so excited, and normally I'm such as you all know, like Ruth, I'm a real Radio 4 listener. I always listen to the Today programme, and the one time I wasn't listening, but luckily you texted me to say, I just heard you, so that was so exciting, and I did actually listen back. So yeah, it's great.
I hope you did. Yes.
So this year, coming 2022, will be the centenary of the first Miss Marple book. which I think is Murder at the Vicarage. I could be wrong though. And so to celebrate, the Agatha Christie Society and Albert Collins Publishers, who are their publishers, are going to put together a new collection of short stories about featuring Jane Marple. So they don't have to be, it doesn't have to be in the foreground, she just has to be kind of in the stories. And there are some really good writers. There's Val McDermott, there's Drita Mitchell, there's Jean Kwok from America, there's Kate Moss, Ruth Ware, so all women, and I think we're all going to have a really different take on it, because you think about it, she's a jolly interesting person, Jane Marple. I know that you like her too, Lesley, but she actually travels quite a lot in the book, so there's quite a lot of scope to talk about, to put her in different places. Drita, for example, is drawing on her sort of Caribbean adventures, and has given her a new friend called Miss Bella, and they're going to be investigating them together. And I'm taking her to Italy, partly because, as you know, I'm half Italian, and I haven't been to Italy for 2 years. So I thought, gosh, I don't know when I'm going there again. So in my short story, which is called Murder at the Villa Rosa, Miss Marple goes to Amalfi. So I'm looking forward to
wow, that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I hope so.
Does she have what's the drink that
Limoncello.
Limoncello.
Yeah, she probably does. Yes, I have to look back, because I was rereading at Bertram's Hotel recently, and she does have a drink in that. I'm trying to remember what is her specific drink that she drinks, and she likes the tea cakes there. So I might. And she's always doing sort of fluffy knitting, isn't she? So I think all those things.
For some nephew or other. Yeah. Well, congratulations anyway. I should really look forward to reading it.
Thank you. So we got some questions coming up here. I don't know if you were keeping your eye on them, Lesley, but
I wasn't, because I need my glasses to do so.
And sometimes we don't see who it is. So apologies if we just say Facebook user.
Yes, there's a lot of Facebook users out there.
Andrew, who says, what's coming next from both you ladies? Love both of your novels, which is really lovely of you, Facebook user.
This could be Andrew Kitchen.
I think it is Andrew, yeah. So Lesley, we've got Distant Dead coming up paperback in October, but knowing you, I know you're working on something now. So what's next?
Yes, I'm. You asked me last week. There might have been a certain amount of nail biting and shifting around in the seat, but I'm on the home straight now of The Companion, which is number. Oh God, I shouldn't have embarked on this. I think it's number 9 in The Detective's Daughter. No, I lied. It's a standalone. Oh my goodness me.
Yes, it's a standalone with some of the characters from the.
Yes, that's right.
Death of a Mermaid. Is that right?
Tony Kemp and Freddie Power. Freddie Power was the mobile fishmonger, and Tony Kemp was the police. Well, the detective, CID detective in Death of the Mermaid, which I conveniently, actually accidentally, it has to be said, have a copy of here.
That's a lovely paperback, isn't it?
Yes, that's the paperback, came out earlier this year. It is a standalone. Although I brought a couple of characters across, and it's set in a stately home. And I'm a massive fan of Agatha Christie, as well as Naomi Marsh, the New Zealand writer. But there is a definite Christie-esque feel to The Companion. It's mostly set in a stately home in the middle of nowhere. There's a heath which you can get to by some dense trees called Deadman's Heath, which you might guess is a crime scene. So, I'm supposed to, according to a review for Distant Dead, make your flesh creep. So and this has rather set a bar for me. So I'm constantly thinking, am I doing this? Is the flesh creeping? So it's become a bit of a test for the writing, the flesh creeping test.
I love books set in sort of isolated places, and I think you do that so well, Lesley. Thinking of the Death Chamber, where they go into the countryside. That's when Stella and Jack go to the countryside for the first time.
Yes, they go to Winchcombe, if anybody knows Winchcombe in Gloucestershire.
And Kaz on the chat says, "Yay for featuring Death of the Mermaid characters."
Well, that's nice. Well, I'm glad to hear that they might have been the opposite, of course. And you do the same, I want to say. The Nighthawks. Actually, my flesh was creeping a bit, I have to say. So if people haven't, if you've got your paperback, you've got an absolute treat. You've got Where Ruth Lives for a start. which is in the middle of nowhere, which, I don't know how she even can do that. So there's always sounds, and she's got Flint and she's got Kate, but still. And anyway, she's surrounded by murders because we've got the beach and Nighthawks. Tell us what Nighthawks are.
Right. Well, Nighthawks it's a name given to metal detectorists, and it's an unflattering name given to them, and it really refers to those because most metal detectorists, I hasten to say, are incredibly law-abiding, and there are some amazing finds that have been found by them. And you have to, when you find them, you have to report them to the Fines Liaison Office, and most detectorists do that. But Nighthawks are people who take things from archaeological sites and don't report them. So it's a name given to them. But the book starts on one of those lovely desolate Norfolk beaches where a group of metal detectorists do find a dead body, and they're actually quite law-abiding, but they call themselves Nighthawks, partly because they like the name. And then there's a murder at a desolate farm called Black Dog Farm, and the Nighthawks are kind of involved in that too. So Nelson starts looking at them very suspiciously, and Ruth has already been a bit suspicious because of the sort of worry about detectorists taking things from sites. But Black Dog Farm links into the Norfolk legend. I think there are many such legends around the country, around the world, in fact. But the Norfolk one is Black Shuck, which is a black dog that appears to you apparently just before you die. So it's not a good thing to see this black dog, and sometimes it has red eyes, and it's a sort of fiendish hound. And I've been to the church at St Mary's in Bungay, which is actually Suffolk, where you're meant to be able to see its claw marks on the door. So I thought that was quite a good setting for this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do that with quite a few books. You use legends. I mean, or even references to legends. I mean, thinking of the Lantern Men as well. But I love the way you use the black dog in this. I mean, Nighthawks and black dogs, blimey, well, I mean, I just think it's gripping, and you don't know who to trust.
Oh, good.
And
I always think that if I'm getting to you that way, and you know my work so well, and you read so much crime fiction, I know that's a good thing. But yes. I mean, place is really important to you too, Lesley, isn't it? Do you want to say a bit about that, a bit about the settings for the Stella books, and also for the new one?
Yeah, I mean, Distant Dead, I've set it literally in time-wise. I've set it in 1940 during the war, during the Blitz in London, which in itself becomes a place, regardless of just Hammersmith and Chiswick, which is where many of the detectives' daughter novels are set. During the Blitz, if you like, the topography changed, but also the atmosphere, smell of burning wood, from fires, which were from the incendiary bombs.
I'd never thought of that till you put that in the book. I mean, that was amazing.
Well, I hadn't until I did the research either. I mean, it really made you realise how, well, I mean, not just London, obviously, Coventry, Liverpool, I mean, cities, the countryside, Sussex, where we live, bombs were dropped, buildings were demolished or eviscerated. I mean, but landscape changed, and the way in which people made their way across the landscape had to change too. Broken glass on the streets, for example, shards of wood, whatever. And as I say, whole streets blocked off. And then the other, what I also wanted to bring in the present day was a place that I just love visiting. And when I love visiting a place, there's always a bit of a clue that eventually it gets into my soul, and then it gets onto the page. It's Tewkesbury Cathedral. I don't know if anyone has been there, but it's a beautiful. Well, I call it cathedral. It's not a cathedral. I mean, essentially it is, but it's an abbey. It's Tewkesbury Abbey. It is actually almost a replica of Gloucester Cathedral, and it's just a fun. Well, I mean, I've said this in other events, but they allow dogs in, and that's how I first kind of went, because I generally have Alfred the dog with me, and so there are a lot of places I can't go. But I could go in there, and I listened to the choir practicing and the organ tuning up, and just sat in silence too, or wandered about the different the South Ambulatory and the North Ambulatory, and there's such wonderful words associated both with the Protestant Catholic faiths, for example, but also the architecture of religious buildings. So altogether, it just fascinates me. That's so that in itself is almost like, if you like, Tewkesbury Abbey is a character in the story. It's certainly a very important place, and it's also a crime scene.
It's fantastic. And the do you remember we did William Shaw, our mutual friend, does this lovely thing called Reading Party, where
Yes.
all the people, you buy tickets for it and you read aloud the first chapter of a book, and we read aloud the first chapter of The Distant Dead, and I think it was the best one of those I've ever been to, because people were so absorbed with the atmosphere in that chapter, weren't they?
Well, they were, and I mean, it's been very exciting because one reader sent me this. I'll show you if I can in front of the camera.
Ooh.
She actually went to Tewkesbury Abbey after reading the book and looked at all the places that are mentioned in all the chapters and sent me a postcard of
Oh,
that was really quite. I was very chuffed by that because it's
that's
kind
so
of thing I do.
lovely.
I mean, that's what I do when I read. So yeah, that was lovely. So
I think that
yeah,
you've got quite an influence on your readers, because didn't somebody name their dog after Stella's dog?
they did. Yes, which yeah, is wonderful. Yeah, and also put a car seat in the back for their Stanley. That's right, Stanley. I'm
Yes.
thinking Alfred. I get Alfred, poor old Alfred, who's real. Of course, to me, Stanley's real. I get them mixed up sometimes, but she's not very happy about. But well,
Well,
I mean, you do get interesting things from readers, don't you? I mean, um, you've got a glass
yes,
with the engraving of your very first novel on the side of it, which I happen to know is called Hair of the Dog,
that's
and you can't
right.
find it in any good bookshop, I'm afraid. One day maybe.
Yeah, the book I wrote when I was 11, our dear mutual friend Kathy Boone Reel gave me a glass which has that written on it, the hair of the dog. Yeah, it's so lovely, isn't it? When I was just
Hmm.
thinking about dogs, I was thinking that I've actually named a dog character in one of my books after your first dog, or the dog that you had when I first met you, Herbert. So he's the dog in Stranger Diaries. So your dogs do live on, you know, all sorts of
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Leslie
Yes.
named dogs. But it's so lovely. It is so lovely when you have that from readers. And you know, I've got you know, I try to keep in my little office here lots of sort of things that readers have given me, which is, it's so nice. I've also got the little blue cat that you gave me, the lucky blue cat,
Ah,
which
oh,
Max
yes.
Mephisto has a lucky blue cat in the Max books. So I'm just again looking through the some of the questions here,
Hmm.
and one that comes up is again from Kaz, and she says, "Very kind, Kaz. I'm going to read out your compliment to me. Elly writes amazing YA," and then she
Hmm.
says, "Young adult books." I'm sure all of us know that, but and then she says, "Have you ever been tempted to try that out, Lesley? And when's the
Um,
next Justice Elly?" Which I will tell you after Leslie's answered.
no, you tell us that first
Oh,
because
well,
I'm also.
actually, I was thinking about it when you were talking, Lesley, because the next Justice book will be out next year. I've just finished writing it, really, and it's called The Spy at the Window. And so the first Justice book starts in 1936, but now we're up to 1939. So I got to write about the war too. Of course, it's very early days of the war, starts in September 1939, kind of the so-called phony war where not much
Yeah,
happens. But actually,
yeah.
quite a lot does happen, and you get the blackouts and you get wearing masks. And I was quite struck reading that about how apposite it felt to now, you know, because they have to go back to school with masks. They don't know what's happening. They don't know when they can come home. And did you find that at all with The Distant Dead? Any sort of things that reminded you of lockdown, really?
I did. I mean, I didn't choose to write a lockdown novel while we were in lockdown. But what I realized I was doing was I'd, for different reasons, chosen to write about a period when we weren't as much, the population wasn't locked down, but they were, greatly limited in what they could do. And there were regulations about what they could not do. And masks, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had gas mask balls to remind people that they should be wearing a mask, and they were supposed to bring their mask to the gas mask ball. Of course, they never got used because there weren't gas
No.
attacks. But
And there were some
yeah,
terrifying children's ones, weren't there? That were sort of meant to like
yes,
Mickey Mouse. And they are so,
yes,
if you Google them, they're so scary.
yeah. I think they scared the children. Of course, yes, and I mean, it was a yeah. I mean, the strictures were different, but actually, some of the slogans were the same. Like "We're all in it together." I mean, that apparently it's not original. It was used during the war. So, and yeah, I mean, I did find that, and one of the things that struck me particularly, and I don't know whether there's any of that will feature in the next Justice novel, but people feeling resentful towards each other because they weren't following the rules when they were following the rules. People not pulling their blackout curtains properly across or forgetting altogether, showing a light, in other words. People, I mean, the police were, if you like, helped by members of the public because they were, turning on each other. And I mean, I won't make too much of that, but it did make criminals of people who weren't essentially criminal. And we have that now, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, seething because I see someone in a shop without a mask, even now, because in Lewes, where I live, the shops have said we'd like you to wear a mask. So it's still very common to do so. And I mean, it all comes from fear, of course. Fear is at the bottom of it all. Anyway, I've gone on, but
yes,
I can't wait to read that because I forget she's not a modern person. Justice.
No, and it's sort of quite interesting to think that she lived through war, as my mum did, and thinking about children living through war. But I know exactly what you mean about attitudes as well, Lesley. And one of the things that my mum said was that people kept saying, don't you know there's a war on? And people say that a lot to Justice in this book, and it suddenly becomes something people say, and blackout is suddenly very important. And of course, Lesley, like my mum, Justice, like my mum, is not good at following rules. So she really doesn't like this. No, we've talked about you being a bit more of a Stella, haven't we, in these books, Lesley, maybe.
I didn't you carry on anyway. I wasn't.
But, I wonder how my mum, who's sadly not with us anymore, would have coped really with lockdown and with the rules. And it is such a difficult time, isn't it? And people are suddenly suspicious of each other. So to go back to the question, I'm not going to let you get off the question which it has asked, which is, have you ever thought of writing a young adult or a children's book?
Yes, I have. I mean, not to the point where I put pen to paper. My first ever completed book was for children aged between about 3 to 6, I suppose, which was an illustrated book called Alexander and Podge, which is about 2 cats, Alexander being my own cat. At the time I was 15, I should say. Alexander was my own cat, and Podge was a cat that came in and stole Alexander's food and then eventually got stuck in a cat flap because he'd eaten so much, but something along those lines. And I illustrated these with oil pastel drawings that I used to love to do. And because I was about to do, I think it was Art CSE, I learned to bookbind so that I could, I've still got it. My mum used to use it. She was a teacher. She used to use it with the infant kids. So it's got a cover. It's got a whole thing, And I can remember lying in the back seat of my parents' car, coming back from a holiday, listening to music and daydreaming about what records I would choose on Desert Island Discs, because I was convinced that it was going to be published by Methuen because they published Tintin, so I had heard of them and I sent it there first, and I was just going to be famous as a result of it. Anyway, none of that happened quite like that.
Did they write back?
They did. A very nice rejection letter. I mean, it was very nice because it was quite personal. They obviously realised I was a bit young. It wasn't the usual template one, but they said it wasn't quite, sort of marvellous drawings, but too expensive to reproduce was what they said.
Oh, that was lovely. That was a nice way. And do you still know your 8 records? Are they different? Are they different now?
They've changed. I mean, Rebel by David Bowie has carried on right from about 15. I think I wouldn't have been 15 because I think it came out, I was older than that. But that's been consistent all the way through. But otherwise, and the Trout Quintet. But otherwise, they change constantly. And they change constantly because I still choose them.
I'm the same. And I guess one of the constants that has been for me has always been Bruce Springsteen, and it's nearly always Thunder Road. I think it is Thunder Road now, and I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. They're probably the 2 that just stay there all the time. The rest do change a bit. And probably Va Pensiero from their Disney Nabucco, which is something that I really love. But yes, the rest do change. Right, let's answer some more questions. There's a question sort of early on, which is, how long does it take to get your books published? From the first draft right through to editorial checks. And funnily enough, that's something a group of us were chatting about today, is how long it takes us to write a book. So I'm just going to say from my at the moment, it takes me about sort of 6 months to write a book. And then there's probably another month of editorial checks, because what happens then, as I'm sure most of you know, is the book goes to your editor. My editor's Jane, like Jane Marple, and she reads it. She comes back with ideas which make the book a lot better, and you do them. And then you go through another check with your copy editor, and then a final check with your proofreader. So I've just delivered Ruth 14, which is called The Locked Room. I'm going to share the cover tomorrow, actually, on social media. So that I've just delivered that, and that will come out in February. So that's about 6 months, isn't it, from delivery to coming out? What's your schedule like, Lesley?
Well, I mean, in terms of, I mean, I kind of think about it in terms of, well, from one, I'd say a year, but that's really because I'm thinking of from the point when, you're much quicker about it than me. I start to write the next one as soon as I have no more to do with the last one. So I guess it's about 9 months, actually. It's longer than you. We've had this discussion because I do more drafts. I also prevaricate. Well, I don't think I prevaricate, but I mean, today, for example, I took half an hour over 2 paragraphs, and I'm sure you never do.
Oh, I do. Sometimes you can write pages and pages, and it's like, especially towards the end, and you get to an exciting bit, and you're like, oh no, I can do that. I can spend. Don't you just find sometimes it's just impossible to get your characters in or out of a room? I can spend ages thinking, oh my goodness, Ruth should be in the kitchen. How could you get to sometimes that seems impossible, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, I haven't got her in front of me, but one of my favourite writers, and I'm rereading her at the moment, is Barbara Pym. And she just gets people out of a room without anything. I mean, one minute, I loved, that was a lovely cup of tea. And the next paragraph, and I'm not joking, the woman is on the top deck of a bus. And nothing happened in between. There was not even a gap. And it was fine. It worked. So I haven't tried that myself yet because I think it probably won't work.
Maybe we worry too much about that. And I suppose if you're watching it on TV, that's quite filmic of Barbara Pym, really, isn't it? Because that's what would happen if you're watching on TV. But oh my goodness, I can't even say it, prevaricated over a paragraph, prevaricated over a paragraph so many times. So goodness. But sometimes everything comes quickly, doesn't it? And other times it's really slow.
I mean, as I say, I took half an hour over these first 2 paragraphs, but then the rest of the chapter, which is about 500-600 words, I was just going. So, and that was conversation and action, and so, and the first 2 paragraphs were description. So maybe that's, I was determined to get the flowers right and the light right, and probably that will be cut when it comes to be edited, but we'll see.
And my editor, Jane, always says that most writers could basically cut their first few paragraphs or the first chapter, and I try and be on top of it now. I try and think, right, I don't want to, but she still wants to cut stuff at the beginning, so you can't. I'm going to answer Lesley's question, Lesley Vincent's question, which is how's Gus the cat, because Lesley, I don't know if you can see him. He's there.
Oh, you've frozen for me. You've frozen. Are you still there? Will we ever know how Gus the cat is? Can you hear me? Well, while we wait to see whether Gus the cat is okay, I see there was also a question about writing, and where's it gone? Oh, you're back. Okay, you're back. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I don't.
Oops, gone again. Okay, well, the question I was reading, which Domenica was reading, because I've taken my glasses off because they tend to reflect, was about, where is it? I had it then, about the challenge of being a writer. Have I got that right? Yes, here we are. What are the challenges of being a writer? Well, I'll answer that first. One of them is when you do an event and your co-writer or colleague vanishes from the scene. But there are many and myriad, I would say. I was talking about one today in terms of just coming up with a description and getting it how you want it, and then it might not actually exist at the end of the book, might not be there. One of the biggest ones for me is thinking that I can't write. I'm writing rubbish. So I can be 50% through the novel, and I'm answering the question. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, hi.
I'm answering the question about the challenges of being a writer. One of which, as I said, was you vanishing completely off the scene. And I was saying, really, for me, I think it's a sudden lack of confidence in what I'm writing about halfway through the novel, when I just think, this is rubbish. And then my partner always says, you always say that 50% through the novel. It's not, and on I go. So
that's one of my it is knowing that, isn't it? I've got a little journal where I write down kind of, sorry about disappearing, by the way. I'm totally blaming Gus because he suddenly leapt onto the desk and he's now sitting by my keyboard. So I'm totally blaming him for it. So yes, but I keep a little journal and I do write how I'm feeling at each point in the book. And I do know that there's always a time and I think, oh my goodness, this is dreadful. No one's ever going to publish this. Nobody will be interested. And you do have good moments where you think, my goodness, this is so good. What shall I wear at the Booker Prize ceremony? I don't want to have the same thing on as Hilary Mantel, But then there are other times in you. But biggest challenges, I think confidence is a big challenge. I think you're right, Lesley. And also I think nowadays we have quite a lot of pressures on us from the outside, to do events, which I know we both really like, and to be on social media and to do those things. And actually, I think probably you have to just remind yourself that your main job is to write. Your only job really is to write the book.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's quite easy to. We talk about prevaricating. There's, social media is something you do have to do as a writer, but it takes you away from the writing. But if the times when I decide I'm going to not look at it, which is quite easy because I haven't rushed to it, I'll then miss a message from a reader that I haven't answered, and it looks like I don't care. So it's fine. But this is me. It is my pretty much only job now, so I can't really call it much of a challenge. Really, it's just fantastic to have that opportunity. It's all I ever wanted to be. So,
yes, and I do feel really lucky. I don't know about you, Lesley, but I do feel really lucky. This is what I always wanted to do. As I was saying earlier on, I wrote my first crime novel when I was 11. So so it's what I've always wanted to do, and now I'm doing it. So that is, you have to remind yourself of that a bit, don't you? Because we all do.
You have to remind yourself of many things about which you feel lucky. I'm going back to the side here. Somebody said that they can't wait to read The Midnight Hour, and it's a great title. And that brings me on to the fact that all your titles are great titles. How do you do it? You've just come up with such brilliant one. You came up with one for me, which was The Death Chamber, I have to say.
Yes, I did.
How do you come up with them?
I really like coming up with titles, and I have to say it is slightly easy for other people, like a lot of things, really. But thank you for mentioning The Midnight Hour, because it is the next Stevens and Mephisto book, and it's coming out in at the end of September, so 30th of September, literally the last day in September, and it's Stevens and Mephisto book 6. But actually, with that one, I had originally called it Curtain Call. And which kind of makes sense in terms of the book, because it's set in the sort of world of show business, of musical. But my editor thought that it sounded a bit final, and I can see that. It's not the last book. And of course, Agatha Christie's last book, which she didn't write last, did she? But she left to be published posthumously, was called Curtain. So I suppose, and so I had the idea of The Midnight Hour. I thought that's a really good title, and the book is set in 1965. So I thought I'll just have a quick look. First of all, you always do this, don't you? Look to see if anyone else has published something called that. And of course, The Midnight Hour is a song, so I thought I'll just have a quick look to see when that came out. 1965 came out that same year. So that really felt like, oh well, I've got to call it that now.
Yeah. Those kind of coincidences happen quite a lot when you're writing something and then you realize there's either a synergy with reality or it literally matches reality when you didn't expect or need it to. But that's quite something.
I love as a title, but that wasn't your original title, was it?
The Distant Dead.
Yes.
Did you say? Well, it was the title. No, it wasn't. I can't remember what. I can't remember what the original title was at all now. But no, I know why I can't remember. There wasn't one.
Hollow something.
Yeah, no. Well, that was. I couldn't come up with a title, and Head of Zeus, who well, I obviously needed a title. They My lovely editor Laura got in touch to say that everybody loved the Hollow House as a title. Everyone being the sales team and anyone who knew about selling books. And normally I don't argue with my publishers because I do the writing and they do the rest, and that's fine. But I just didn't like the Hollow House. It didn't feel at all the book I was writing, because it's not hollow in any sense. And it reminded me of The House with No Rooms, which was based on the Marianne North Gallery in Kew Gardens, which is to some extent hollow because there aren't sort of stairs and floors and rooms. So I wasn't happy about it. So I did actually say so. And then they came back with The Distant Dead, which is a phrase in the story. And that was just perfect. I was so happy with it because I was still writing the novel. I mean, you've had this, you get this too. I was actually still writing the novel at the time. So it felt to me it was the novel I was writing, because the other thing, when you get the cover with the title and everything, personally, that's another time when that's a challenge, although it's fantastic as well, because it's like, I have to write this thing. There's a cover, but there's no book.
It's so scary, isn't it, when the cover appears on Amazon and other sites. And I remember when I was writing The Stranger Diaries, which is my first kind of standalone book, and it said I hadn't finished writing it, but it was on Amazon, and it said, has a surprise ending. And I thought, well, it's a surprise to me too, because I haven't written it. So yes. You just have to kind of hope, you just have to kind of hope that it will come, don't you?
You do. I mean, I think being a writer, there's a wing and a prayer to it. It's a brilliant thing. There are challenges, but it's, as you saying, when it's going well, you just feel this is great, and yeah, they're polishing your shoes for the booker, but you're also kind of like really enjoying it, aren't you? So
yeah, and it's a lovely world to be in, and it is. Quickly to say to Steve, I'm so glad the books arrived. So I know we both took part in the auction, didn't we, Lesley? The brilliant UK Crime Book Club auction. And I sent the book to Steve in America, so he just got it. Hooray!
Oh, that's lovely.
And Andrew is asking who our favourite authors are. I think, Andrew, we would just assume that each other are, which actually I think is probably true. Leslie's definitely one of my favourite authors.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we liked each other's books pretty much before we met each other, which was
beautiful. We did. And actually, we met at a Crime Writers Association lunch, which can be slightly sticky occasions, but this was worth it for meeting Lesley. And we got on really well. And I think then we both went back and read each other's books thinking, I hope we like the books. But obviously we did.
That's how it went. Yeah, and we did, which was great. I mean, that's, I always thought, I mean, at the risk of sort of, there's a phrase which, I can't even, but I love your books. Let's just do that, and then everyone else can tell us.
And I love yours, Lesley. But who else? Who else is your? And is there anyone you've discovered recently?
I was going to say, because there's a big clue in the face behind me, which is Virginia Woolf, and I don't live very far from where she used to live in Rodmell. Well, I mentioned Barbara Pym earlier. I think she's just a running favourite, really. And I haven't actually read any crime novels recently, so I'm not in a position to sort of to say, what a more recent crime novel. I've literally been reading Barbara Pym for the last, I suppose, 6 weeks or so. Well, the only crime novel I've read, which was rereading, was The Nighthawks, as I said earlier, which was, as I said, I mean, reading your novels is getting into a bath of lovely warm water when your bones are aching and you just relax. And actually, that does hold on to that word relax because there's a question on it. But what about you, Dom? What is Elly? What are your favorites?
That's a lovely thing to say, Lesley, by the way. I really love it. And you introduced me to Barbara Pym. And I love her books. William Shaw often does stuff with us, and he's another favourite writer of mine. Writes these amazing books at the moment set in Dungeness, which, if you haven't read them, The Bird, I would say start with The Bird Watcher, which is the first one, which is so good. Well, my favourite writer is kind of dead writer is Wilkie Collins. I love Wilkie Collins. Really inspired by The Moonstone and books like that, and The Woman in White. I would be hard put to choose my favourite Wilkie Collins. It would either be Woman in White, Moonstone, or No Name, which people don't read very much, but I really like No Name.
I love that one. Yeah,
Recently, I've just read Val McDermot's new one, which is called 1979, and it's so good. And I feel like it's such a great thing that Val, at the height of her fame and powers, is still writing a new series. It's the first new series, and that it's so good. You know, it's so. Here comes Gus. You don't do anything, Gus. It's gone. And I'm just reading a book that is coming out next January, and it's called The Twyford Code, and it's by Janice Hallett. And I don't know if any of you read The Appeal by Janice Hallett, which is really good. And it's all in emails. It's actually quite hard to follow in a way, but that's part of it. And the new book, which is out next year, is all in in phone messages. And I did think of you, Lesley, when I was reading it, because it's those, you know, when people leave you voice messages, and you're the only person who ever leaves me voice messages. So it's all about voice messages. So I really do recommend that when it comes out, the Twyford Code. So lots of love here on our questions for William Shaw, and we certainly concur with that. He's a really he's always got something fresh and new to say, hasn't he, William? And
yes, he has.
and his characters are great too. Somebody was asking about how we relax. Was that
that's where I was going to go next with that. Well, one way I can say that we both relax because we do it together is swim in the sea, which some people who saw our first trailer for our first abortive conversation, not that this is the second one, I should add, we were in the sea at the time. But that has actually been a wonderful thing, certainly for me over the summer. Down on the beach in the sunshine, bobbing around. I don't swim. Elly Griffiths is the swimmer. She swims about and then she comes back to me. I mean, you know, talking about a mermaid, and I just bob up and down and just all lie on my back and just bask in the sun like a seal.
It's been great, hasn't it? Even when the day isn't that. We've been very brave, actually, haven't we, Lesley? And we've gone in even when it's quite cold. And we were there with my sister, Julia. I don't know if she's watching, sometimes she is. But so Julia came down with us, but she won't mind me saying that Julia is very much of a coward about getting into cold water. And Lesley said to her, go in backwards. And Julia says it saved her life. It's changed her life. So she went in backwards, and got in the sea really easily. So that's a bit of a tip. No one wants to get in the cold sea. So yeah, for me, definitely swimming in the sea, walking. Lesley, you're a big walker too. I love to walk. I like watching TV. Sometimes funny things like Ghosts I love, or Motherland, or something like that, really sort of relaxing. And I also do play, a bit like Harbinder Kaur in Stranger Diaries and Postcode Murders. I do play the odd game on my phone, which Lesley can't understand when I'm sitting there playing Panda Pop. And she says to me, why are you killing all those pandas? And I keep saying to her, Lesley, I'm saving them. She doesn't understand.
Doesn't look like it to me, but anyway. Well, as thanks to you, I now do the online on the app. I do the Guardian crossword.
I do the Guardian crossword every day. Yeah,
but you do it in about 2 minutes, the quick one. I mean, and I've been doing the quick crossword now for about 40 years. Obviously in the actual paper, and now as an app. And last week I completed it in 15 minutes, which is the fastest I've ever done it, and I think the only time I've ever completed it. So,
well done, you see. Somebody said to me, you know how sometimes you can't finish it. Someone says just one clue you can't get. And then, so you leave it. And then the next day you come downstairs, you see the Guardian there with your breakfast stuff. And you think, oh, that's it, immediately. And someone said it's because it's been in the universal subconscious all that time. It's been out there in the ether. And so many other people have done the crossword in that time. I don't know if this is true.
Well, that's interesting. I mean,
sort of Jungian. The answer is there, but so let's have a quick look down. Oh, Marion Todd's got an arc of the Twyford Code. It is fab. Lucy Sampson, I did a master's in Victorian literature too, just like your sister. Love the Ladies of Sea trailer, says Lucy. Carol Bennett was asking about the Stranger Diaries. Thank you, Carol. She says, fabulous to start with a ghost story, but I was convinced I read it before. Where did you get your inspiration for it from? It was just a story that I used to tell my kids when they were growing up, and I do really like telling ghost stories. And I think it probably might seem a bit familiar because it does actually have quite a lot of the standard things. And Lesley and I are both teachers, and I do teach a lesson on ghost stories and the conventions of them. Everything happens in threes, everything happens at a certain time. So maybe that's why it seemed familiar to you. But I did really enjoy writing it. There's certain stock characters as well. It's quite interesting that always turn up in ghost stories, like the loathly lady who is there, and the woman in black, for example, and the helper and the hinderer. It's quite interesting to read them in that way. But you like ghost stories too, don't you, Lesley? I mean, like Mark Sanderson of the Times, everyone, said that Lesley could make your flesh creep at will. Do you enjoy scary
Yes, that's
people?
what it was. Flesh creeping at will. I'm not sure that's true, because I'm not sure the will has been there to creep the flesh recently. But I do like ghost stories. When I had the Armada book of ghost stories when I was little. Well, not that little. I think I must have been about 11, I suppose. With headless horses galloping along, and there was a terrible story told at school. I don't know if you had the same one. Well, actually, that was a horrible story. I'm going to stop now because it might give everyone nightmares. But anyway, it was involved in headless and various things. But I love the idea that you talk to somebody and you have a proper conversation with them, and then you get back to the pub or somewhere and they say, well, she died 100 years ago.
Yes, a friend of my friend Nancy's dad tells a great story. He's a pilot, and the pilot is and that, I always believe Peter when he told me the story was true, that he's flying his plane. Suddenly a fog comes down very suddenly, like it does. He can't see, and in those little planes you have two sort of joysticks, so one in front of you, one in front of the passenger. Suddenly it starts to move, and the plane is guided back to land, and Peter gets out of the plane and he says, "Oh, thank you," and the guy says, "Oh, don't worry, I was in a terrible situation like that one time." And Peter says to him, "I'm surprised you weren't killed." I was. And I believed that story for years, that Peter had met this man. Maybe it's true, Peter, if you're watching me. But those sort of ghost stories. But you were saying about schools, because my school had a resident ghost nun. I was at a Catholic comprehensive. And I think most schools do have a ghost story if there's not a nun. So I did use that in the Stranger Diaries as well, that the school ghost, there's always one, isn't there? We used to say in our school that if you saw it, somebody was going to die. Also, if the bell rang, because there wasn't meant to be a bell in the bell tower, somebody was going to die. And I remember once in a maths lesson, it rang, and we were all convinced that Mr. Cusworth, our rather lovely maths teacher, was going to die, but luckily he didn't. Somebody says on here, what's the title of the book you've never finished? I wonder if that means a book that we started, like, I don't know, or one of our books. So I'm going to take it to be the second one. Lesley, have you got an unfinished book anywhere?
I've got unpublished books.
Unfinished, a book that you started writing but didn't finish.
No, I know. I was just trying to think.
Unpublished,
unpublished and unfinished. Certainly unpublished. Yes, I suppose I have, really, because I'm sort of looking about whether I can grab it. But I'd start a notebook with writing, and it was all quite promising, and then it came to a halt, but it doesn't have a title. I mean, they don't have titles. They just started. No, I mean, apart from these notes, which, because I moved house last year, I've seen a lot of stuff more recently and found lots of stuff I was writing at, much younger than I thought I was, but then I thought I started writing, and so they're all unfinished. And I can remember the first novel I finished, which was wasn't published, but because of it, I was commissioned to write another novel, Seven Miles from Sydney. But, that one, I'm kind of getting lost here. I can remember this novel. I got to page 100, and I could not believe I'd never ever got to page 100 before. And then I carried on, and did finish it. So that I've got quite a few, but they never got titles, because, as I was saying, well, I didn't say right at the beginning, but I did mention I'm not great with titles, and I start a book, I'm writing it without a title. So there's several without a title.
Do you ever use bits of them, though? Do you ever think, I wrote that bit of that story that can come in here into the Stella book or something?
No, I did have the opposite of that, which was I used chapter 11 of one of the novels. I can't remember which one it was now. I was writing it, and I had saved it. I'd saved it, and I was putting it. I thought it worked perfectly there. And then I was writing. I thought it's very familiar. And I realized it was in a previous one. So I'd already published it. It was already in existence. So that's happened.
Well, I've got one here actually. It was in my drawer here, and I found it while we were look. That is my school textbook, and I just want a moment to notice how neat I was at school with my lovely cross sections of fruit. I guess it was some sort of science book, but I found this when I was going through the attic. And then halfway through the book, I got bored with science, obviously, and I started that, and it's called Like Leaves on a Tree. And that's unfinished, so I don't really know. Well, I think I do actually know where I was going with it. And it's about a priest who comes to a parish and realizes that his predecessor has been murdered. So, and like leaves on trees, from that hymn, we blossom and flourish like leaves on a tree and wither and perish, but naught changeth thee. So quite a good, I have to say, quite a good title. So one day I might finish it. It's probably just a short story, really, but that is one, like leaves on the tree. Never finished that one.
Brilliant! That's absolutely brilliant.
So let's see where we are. Any questions we haven't answered? Shout if you want your question answered, because I think we're coming up to the last 10 minutes of our chat. So let's say a bit more about the next things. So say a bit more about the companion, Lesley, and I know you're just finishing it off, but when we might see it in the shops.
We might see it in the shops. I don't think it's got a date yet, but it will be late April, early May. That tends to be when books come out, and unless, well, I mean, we never know what's going to happen, do we? But that's when it's meant to come out. Yeah, I mean, I've said quite a lot about it. I think
it's a standalone, but it has Freddie and Tony in it from.
Yeah, and it's got new characters. I know you've written, standalones, and well, you also got more than one series, so you had to start with different characters. What was it like for you to leave Ruth and Nelson behind when you, for example, were doing them with Stevens and Mephisto, because that was the first?
It was quite lovely, actually, to be honest, to leave them behind. And it was really nice because the first Stevens and Mephisto book is called Zigzag Girl, set in 1950. So it was also quite a relief to be in the 50s. So no mobile phones, no internet, no DNA testing, So actually it did feel like a bit of a break. And I'd always wanted to write about the 1950s. My granddad was a musical entertainer. He was in Variety.
Oh, my goodness.
And I kind of wanted
to write. One of those.
Yeah, sort of kind of want to write about that world. And it was really nice. It felt, and I did find for me, and I don't know if you felt the same going back after Death of a Mermaid, but I went back to the Ruth books and sort of added vigor. And I'm not sure that the Ruth series would have carried on as long as it has if I hadn't had those breaks to write other things. Not breaks, as I hasten to say, I still published a Ruth book every year, but I've now done standalones and done another series, done the children's series. And every time I write another book, I'm always really happy to be with a new character, but also then I'm really happy to be back with Ruth. And the next thing for me is Ruth 14, which is called The Locked Room. And it's set, so we maybe just quickly talk about this because it's set in 2020 and it's set during lockdown. So it starts in February 2020, where Nelson is saying that people say there's a virus coming. I don't believe in any of it. Stuff and nonsense. Jesus wept. And Cathbad is busy stealthily putting a circle of protection around the house because he knows what's coming, really. So, but it was something I thought about a long time because I'm writing a series, as you are, long-running series. And I thought, shall I just skip coronavirus? Shall I just skip COVID? Do people want to read about it? I still don't know if they do, really. But I decided that because they're a long-running series, people might want to know what happened to Ruth and Nelson in lockdown. And what happens if they, for example, I'm not saying this happens, what happens if they get locked in together? So I mean, did you think about what you were going to do about COVID and lockdown, Lesley? Did you have that discussion?
Because for the novel, for the companion, that is the one that would really be, I mean, Distant Dead was written during lockdown, but it was already conceived before lockdown. So I was writing, and then, as I say, I discovered there were obvious parallels. But for the companion, that as an idea was seeded during lockdown. And I did actually start off with them wearing masks, and then I changed my mind. I mean, I think it's different if you're writing. I know we've talked about this before. If you're writing established characters and people, we just want to know what's happening with Ruth and Nelson and Cathbad and everybody. And for another thing, as you've said, there are dates on the novels, and so you would have had to kind of somehow move them into the future almost in order to bring them into
Yes, I would have had to skip 2020, but then who
Yeah.
knows? In our world at the moment, who knows what's going to happen next? So
No, but I didn't have to. I've got away with that, if you like, because I'm writing a standalone, and so I didn't feel it was. I didn't need, and it's not set in a time. It's set in the present, but it's the general present. It's not. It's the summer, and that's all I say. So I wasn't bound to lockdown. And when I come back with Ruth and Stella, I keep doing this. Ruth and Jack. No, Stella and Jack.
I know. Somebody said here we should do a Harry and Stella novel, and we're doing it now, aren't we?
We are doing it now. Well, we have done a short story, haven't we?
We have.
Which is as yet, well, we've yet to quite finish it. It's finished, but we need to correct it. But when I come back next time with a Jack and Stella novel, it will be 2022, and I hope we're not still dealing with a pandemic at that point. And so I can refer to it as something that's happened and the effects of it. I mean, so that's what I will do. There'll be some. We already know some of the effects of it. And so that can just come up. It won't be the story, but it can be there, whatever those effects might be.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack's got kids. They wouldn't have been to school. They will have missed out on education. That's not going to be the novel.
Yeah, and I think those effects are going to go on, aren't they?
And so they will be in a post-lockdown world.
It does raise questions, though, doesn't it? Quite interesting questions about whether our characters are in this real world or not, doesn't it? Because, there's nothing to stop us having a normal 2020 where COVID didn't happen, and how much do you put in of real life? And I don't know the answer to this. I'm just throwing it up there. For example, we both set our books very much in real places, but we've both changed a couple of things, haven't we? Didn't you change the position of a water tower in one of your books?
I did. I'm always faithful to the topography, if you like, or to the cause and effect of things. So you wouldn't have a water tower unless it was there for some reason. It's not just there. So instead of having it where the water tower I was basing it on, which that one is in Ladbroke Grove, overlooking the Sainsbury's car park, and at one stage served a purpose. Well, I think it was. Well, no, I'm not going to guess, but I think it was to do with putting out incendiaries.
Yes, I think it was.
But anyway, I moved it to Chiswick next to where there was a brewery. So that there is a brewery. It's Fuller's. So it would still have a use. Only it wasn't used anymore. It was, a living dwelling. And you did. Well, you didn't do that with the tower, did you? In the Oxo Tower?
No, I kept the tower up. I have to say, such a chilling start to that book of yours with the water tower, and I won't say any more, but so chilling. So there is a tower in King's Lynn called Campbell's Soup Tower.
Oh, that's right.
And it was not. So I started off with it in the book. So then it was knocked down in real life, and I knocked it down in my books. But I was talking to Jim Kelly, who those who haven't read him, really good writer, writes about King's Lynn. And I said to him, what a shame about the tower. And he said, well, it's still up in my books. And in a way, why not? In a way, his King's Lynn's not my King's Lynn. Neither of us is the real King's Lynn. I don't know the answer to it, but I think you put your finger on it, Lesley, that there has to be some sort of inner logic, doesn't there?
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I started off trying to hide the names of things. So the Salt Marsh is sort of Titular Marsh in Norfolk, but I didn't say the name of it. And in the third book, Maltonsea's End is Haysborough. And that was partly because I thought that Norfolk people wouldn't like to have bodies on their doorsteps, but it turns out they really like that. So as the books have gone on, the places have become more real. So we've got 1 minute left. I just got it. Carol Bennett says she must read Lesley's books. You must, Carol. The best one to start with, I would start right at the beginning with The Detective's Daughter. What would you say, Lesley?
Yes, I would. I mean, I read books, series writers, and by accident sometimes start quite well into the series or even the latest one because it's all that's there somewhere. And then it's quite exciting to go back and see how they got to where you started. But yeah, I mean, we both write our books, don't we? To be, if you like, standalone stories.
Yeah, you can start at any point. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, but I agree, though. I agree. I mean, why not?
But it's
start
just
at the
such a
beginning,
nice
like,
ride to start right from the beginning. So I
Yeah.
would, if it were me, I would start with The Detective's Daughter, and my first one is The Crossing Places. So
Yeah.
that's where Andrew asked me how old Harry Nelson is. I think he's 51, Andrew. Might have to check. But in the front
Yeah.
of my little notebook, I do write down when they're all born. So I would have to be able to. I think he's 51.
I think he's 51. You actually say so. It's actually in here. So if you want to know,
Oh, do they? Well, I do say so. He's 51 at the Nighthawks because they take him out for a drink at the Admiral Nelson for his 50th. So I think we're having to wrap up now because it's 8 o'clock. So just thanks so much to everyone who put in questions, came to listen to us. Thanks, Sam, for setting us all up. Sorry I disappeared quickly. Thanks to the UK Crime Book Club, Kaz and David. We love you.
And happy birthday. I think it's David's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, David. Or was it yesterday? Anyhow, happy birthday. Thanks to all the admins, Lucy, and Sam and everybody. So I think that's all. Is that all, Lesley?
Yeah, I think it is all. Yeah, I mean, we're not going swimming this evening. I'm sure everyone wants to know that. You know, but see you in the sea next year, everybody.
Yeah, see you in the sea next year. Thanks so much for coming along, and thanks for